Okay. Oh, okay. Good morning again. What did we lose? We're here. All right. Last class, the bonus class. Very, very interesting class today. I'm excited. And it is lesson 6, entitled, what's the title of today's class? Lesson 6, the ultimate destination. All right. Okay. Page 209. Benjamin Franklin famously said that in this world, nothing can Did we lose you? Is this okay? You see me now? You hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, perfect. In that case, we don't need this. Let's hope I hope everything works out. Okay, this is what we need. All right. So the question is, can we get rid of death? The funeral homes will be very upset. Right now, really upset at them. So they're gonna get a big lecture from me. It's time really. It's really a matter of education. They shouldn't be doing these things. But the answer is, we're gonna see today. Actually, there's a little video here if you want to watch. Today, there are scientists who are working to get rid of death. That we should be able to not just prolong life, but get rid of death altogether. You think it's possible? Let's watch this video. No. Here. No? All right, let's see. Watch this guy. Watch this guy. Too many people. Huh? Too many people on earth.
Silver hair, noble gracefulness, mellowed insight. With all of the perks of seniority, people still prefer to be full of youthful vigor and naively trust that multiple decades of life stretch endlessly into the golden horizon. Wishful thinking? Would it help to adopt a name like Methuselah? The Torah sets the lifespan of ancient Methuselah, the patriarch of mankind's earliest generation, at a record-breaking 969 years. To be fair, a number of his contemporaries came tantalizingly close. Adam rolled in at 930. Canaan was set to rest at 910. Is there hope for mankind to climb back up the ladder of longevity? Or are we doomed to accept the appearance of gray as an inevitable hand on a limited biological clock?
It's been obvious to me ever since I was a young kid that aging is the world's most important problem.
Meet Aubrey de Grey, Chief Science Officer of the SENS Research Foundation, and the world's leading scientific proponent of engineering techniques to rejuvenate the human body and stop aging.
We are in range of turning out a solution at an exponentially accelerating rate.
Dr. Gray is also a fan of biblical Methuselah. and coined the term Methuselarity to mean a future point in time when all the medical conditions that cause human death will be eliminated. It sounds fantastical, but in 2005, MIT's Technology Review, in cooperation with the Methuselah Foundation, announced a $20,000 prize for any molecular biologist who could demonstrate that SANS was so wrong that it is unworthy of learned debate. None of the submissions succeeded in proving that de Grey's theories were demonstrably wrong. At the same time, many of his proposals could not be verified with the current level of scientific knowledge and technology. And so, the question of lifespans rivaling Adam and Noah remains unsolved for now. Scientists aside, the best place today for insight into perpetual life is in something eternal. The Torah has remarkable teachings on the spiritual origins of the conditions that cause physical death. But do the Torah's ancient or mystical wisdoms consider the gradual breakdown of the human system fixable? Could the human aging condition as we know it be reversed?
Okay. All right, listen, I'm not a biologist. I cannot comment on this. I'm a rabbi, and I will try to give you the Jewish view about can we reverse aging and death. So let's jump into this. So this is the topic of today's class, and we start with let's start with the beginning of time. The beginning of time, as we know it in the Torah, God created the world. On the first day He created the world. What did He do? He said, "Let there be light." Right? God created the world, and the rest was made in China. On the sixth day, God created Adam and Eve, right? What was the first commandment when they were in the Garden of Eden? What was the first? No, they had a great time, but there was one thing they weren't allowed to do, and that was eating from the tree. Let's look at text 1a, page 210, Genesis. God commanded man, saying, "Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of God and good and evil you should not eat. On the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die." So consequence of eating would be death. So what actually happens? We know what happened. Next text 1b. The woman, okay, blame the woman. The woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was the light to the tree, to the eyes, and the tree was desirable to make one wise. She took up its fruit and ate, and she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. The eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves and made themselves girdles. Right? So, we all know that they didn't die right away. How long did they live? Like 930 years, like hundreds of years. So they didn't really die right away. This was day one of their creation, right? They were babies. They were just created. Same day, day six, when they were created on Friday, same day they ate from the tree. So was God's promise empty? God says they're going to die. Was it empty? They lived a very long life, huh? Eventually, they didn't say when. Yeah. Didn't say when, right? So text 1c. The comment, by the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for you were taken therefrom. But dust you are, and to dust you will return. So basically, from the biblical text, death was not the plan. The plan was that Adam and Eve was created, and they shall live forever. Forever, soul and body. The fact that they ate from the tree, the consequence was death. As the line goes, from dust you come, from dust you shall return, as a result, as a consequence. So death was brought by Adam and Eve by their mistake. So when we try to take away death, what do we need to do? We need to take away or rectify what Adam and Eve did. In other words, the default position is no death. The non-default position is death as a consequence of what they did. If we can rectify what they did, death ceased to exist. Isaiah famously says over here, text 2, God shall conceal death forever, and he shall wipe the tears of every face. Bila hamavas hanetzach. It is on, if you go to our cemetery, at our cornerstone, I picked one line on the cornerstone, and we put it there 4 years ago, and that's this line from Isaiah. The promise of Bila hamavas hanetzach. God shall conceal death forever. Because we Jews have a belief that death is not the end, not only not the end as we learned in classes that we go to different places, but matter of fact that we believe and pray for a time where death will cease to exist. It's a promise that God made to us, to the Jewish people.
Death of the body.
Death of the body. But 1 second, huh?
We don't know what concealed means.
Concealed?
Concealed. Visually.
Okay, visually, what does that mean?
Well, you might be able, visually you might see that the person is no longer there, but
They're still present, but that's not what it means. That's not what it means. Because it talks strictly about a time where people will no longer die. God shall you said the word conceal death forever. Okay, you have a good point. I think it's the translation in Hebrew, bila does not really mean conceal. It's not a good accurate translation. Actually, the word bila, look it up in Hebrew, means swallowing. Swallowing. That God would swallow death forever. That's a good observation. I wasn't like, why are you saying conceal? I look at the Hebrew. It's okay. But right, you're right. Okay, that much better. Look it up. Bila means to swallow. God will swallow death forever, and he shall wipe the tears off every face. If it's going to be concealed, still there, that doesn't make me stop crying. I took a picture, actually, when I was out of the cemetery, I took a picture, but I will see at the end of the class if I can pop it up on the screen so you can see what happened to my screen. Hey, death. Resurrection of this. Come on. What is going on here? Okay. There we go. All right. The big question is though like this. We learned in lesson 4, and last week actually we learned about punishment, reward and punishment, correct? What did we learn? That our action in this world, everything we do, if we do a mitzvah, we get rewarded, or more, it's a consequence for what? For our soul to reap a reward. And where is that reward? Mainly in the world to come, in the Gan Eden, right? That's what we say Kaddish, because on the flip side, if we don't do the right thing, we need to go through a cleansing period. So how does that fit where the soul is all about the afterlife, meaning it gets the final destination of the soul to get its reward after reincarnation is in the afterlife, in Gan Eden? So how does this fit that one day the body is not going to die, so how does the soul get its reward? The soul cannot get its reward in a body because the body is physical and it's not in Gan Eden. Right, legit question. So how does it go together with the idea that death will cease to exist? And the answer is, what happened at the Garden of Eden the first day when they ate from the tree? Why weren't they allowed to eat from the tree? What was so bad about the tree, right? The big story. And what happened as a consequence? That death came. The snake came, convinced Eve, and Eve convinced Adam, and death came as a consequence. What's the connection? So you see, when they were created, when Adam and Eve were created, body and soul were in perfect harmony. The body was a complete vehicle to the soul. So the soul had no problem being in the body because the body was transparent to only godliness. It was selfless. There was no ego. There was no evil. Everything was only about good and godliness and spirituality. So it was Garden of Eden down in this physical world. When they ate from the tree, what happened? Adam and Eve acquired the concept of selfishness, of ego, and the body became a disruptive garment to the soul. It no longer was a friend of the soul, it actually was fighting the soul. The soul is selfless, and the body is selfish. So what happens, look in text 3. At the time, page 212, at that time, before the sin of the tree of knowledge, all of Adam and Eve's pursuits and all of their limbs were aimed solely to please their creator, not to engage in temporal pleasure. They viewed marital intercourse no differently than purposeful eating and drinking. They viewed their reproductive organs much as we view our mouth, faces, and hands. So sin creates an illusion of a godless self. The body became a separate entity from the soul. And what happens as a result? What happened the first thing when they ate? Text 4. No, before text 4, what happens? They were ashamed of their nakedness. All of a sudden, they felt that their body is different than who they are as a soul. And they covered up their parts, the private parts. So, so how does this bring death? How does eating from the tree and becoming selfish and egotistic as a body, a separate entity, how does that bring death? For this, look in text 4. Death was introduced to the world as a direct result of the sin of the tree of knowledge. Life is associated exclusively with holiness. Unholiness, on the other hand, is synonymous with death. As a result of the sin of the tree of knowledge, unholiness, spiritual death, became part of the human being's identity. And this resulted in physical death. So let's review this again. Before, the body and soul were in sync. The body is selfless. Body only desire is to do the will of God. Body has no ego. There's no conflict of interest between body and soul. The body is an extension of the soul. After, when they ate from the tree, there was a body and soul misaligned. Body is conscious of a self or ego separate from the soul. Body is a soul for selfish desires. Body can potentially go against God's will, correct? Yes? Why? Because we became selfish. I don't care about God. The fact that I don't care about God and do something against God comes from the body, not from the soul, not from the neshama. So there's a new perception of an independent godless self, hence spiritual death, which happens after eating of the tree, resulted in physical death.
Rabbi,
Yes.
true or false? God knew they were going to eat it.
God knows everything. I know that's a good question. But here, actually, let's assume for this class that God knew. The God knew, right? And you can blame God for it. But this was exactly, it was part of the plan. But actually, I want to take your question and inject it in our class, because we all think about, okay, it was part of the plan back then. Hey, but there's a final plan. The plan began then with a certain direction and a goal, and we don't talk enough about the goal. We only talk about past. Today we're going to talk about the goal, so we can see how all this plan unfolds. Okay, just one more point. Thank you. Holiness is life. Unholiness is death. What does that mean? What does that mean? Very short. Basically, to be alive, any life comes from God. Correct? God gave life to the world. God created everything. And not only that, God created the world back then, but actually God creates the world every single moment. It's like electricity, right? The refrigerator only works when it's plugged in. The moment it's unplugged, it ain't gonna work. So God didn't create a world and now put an autopilot and now just do whatever you want. God infuses the world every moment with life. So life comes from God, and God equals holiness. So anything that is holy, right, is life, and everything that is unholy, that we choose to do unholy, that is an unholy activity, is by definition the opposite of life, is death. Because I am demonstrating in this moment where I go against God's will, that God doesn't exist, and my own independent existence equals ego, that is spiritual death. And spiritual death totals equals physical death. Okay, that's so important. 1 second. Now, what is death? And Freddie, tell them they can come in and join the class. Yep. What is death? Define death. As we learned in the other class, death is the separation of the body, of the mortal body, from the immortal soul. Spiritual death is when body and soul are separated because of misaligned values and desires. You see where we're going with this? If we can realign the body with the soul, there's no more spiritual death, there's no more physical death either. And this is where the concept of what we call the belief in a Tchiyat HaMetim, resurrection of death, comes into play. So before the sin, this in summary, before the sin, body and soul were a seamless unit. The body was utterly holy. Death wasn't part of the human experience. And after the sin, now it became an independent body ego, conscious and soul God conscious. Death is part of the human experience. You want to stay closer, Scott? You good? Welcome. Okay. So now we know the problem, right? And they say knowing the problem is half of the cure or the solution, correct, right? But how do we get there? We didn't talk about how do we get there? Okay, we know the problem. Blame it on Adam and Eve, right? How do we get there? Before we answer, huh? Starting with the rabbi. I paid him to say that. Okay. Before we answer this question, let's first get a look at what will it actually look like when death finally gets extinguished, eradicated. Let's look what does the prophets tell us? The prophets are full with the prophecies and vision, what will happen in the coming of the Messianic age. I want to just clarify a few things. Number one, the word Mashiach and Messianic go together. Mashiach is the Hebrew, Messiah is in English, Messianic, all that, just clear. Maybe you've heard the word in other religions. And again, other religions have not only borrowed, but they have stolen the terms and, for the better term, manipulated the terms. So we do something that's very sensitive or like, oh, that's not a Jewish thing. It is all the foundation. Not only it is a nice, beautiful future that we hope to, but as we're going to see, it is one of the 13 principles of faith. Ani ma'amin. You know that word in Hebrew means? Ani ma'amin. I believe. Ani ma'amin. I believe. There's a famous song that Jews sang, many Jews sang, when they were led into the gas chambers. Ani ma'amin be'emunah was actually conducted in the camps by the Moshe Rebbe. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shalema be'viat HaMashiach. I believe with full faith in the coming of Mashiach. So Mashiach is not about a person. There will be a king, but it's not about, the focus is not about an individual person, which is, it's not Jewish. Rather, it is about a transformation of the whole world, what we call the Messianic era. And this will happen in stages. Let's look at how it happened. All right. Resurrection of the death is actually the last stage of the Messianic era. First, stage one, the prophets say, will be the rebuilding of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. The third temple, number 3. We don't have that, not yet, not yet. Not yet, they're waiting for you. Not yet. The Beit HaMikdash HaShlishi, the third temple. In our prayers, we pray, Sheyibane Beit HaMikdash Mheila V'Yamenu V'Seicha Kim. So yeah, we pray Hashem to rebuild the temple. We mourn. Why do we mourn a temple that got destroyed 2,000 years ago on Tisha B'Av? We mourn 2 temples. Temple number 1 built by King Solomon. Temple number 2 built after the Babylonian exile. Why do we still mourn? Because we are not just mourning, we are also praying for the rebuilding of the third temple as it was promised. So we go to the western wall, which is the remnant of the second temple wall, which is the holiest spot we Jews are permitted to go. We're going to see the end if we have time. We're not allowed to go on the Temple Mount because we are not in the state of purity. We're spiritually not pure to go on top of Temple Mount unless it's a security issue. The Israeli army is for sure allowed to go because they're protecting us. But we Jews, the holy spot we can go is the western wall. We're not allowed to go on top. That's where the rebuilding of the Holy Temple will come. JLI actually did a course on a 6-week course on the concept of Messianic era, and I hope to teach it one day. Stage 2 will be the ingathering of the exiles to the land of Israel. It will bring all Jews together back to the land of Israel. By the way, if you listen to the Khatikvah national anthem, what does it say there? Huh? Khatikvah mitzvah. There's a line there that the state of Israel was Reshit Geulatenu. It was the beginning of the Messianic era. Big debate if that's appropriate or not. Okay, not for today. But the ingatherings of Jews, the Rebbe in 1990, when the Soviet Union fell, and nobody dreamed it will ever fall, saw it as a clear indication as these are signs that we are coming closer to the Messianic era.
Rabbi,
Yes.
so I have been told that the reason many evangelical Christians
Yep.
support Israel is because of this.
Yes,
They're also waiting for the bones to rise, and I think this is
exactly. So again, yeah, and I don't want to go too much into that. And most Jews know more about that than they know our own sources. And as we're going to see this through the class, yeah, and that's actually a challenge. How do we, they're so supportive, but they haven't sensed a certain agenda that is so un-Jewish.
Correct.
Okay, but moving on. And the third, stage 3, actually says like 40 years after, depending on how fast we usher in Mashiach, will be the resurrection of the dead. Where will it happen? First of all, who gets resurrected? Who gets resurrected? So look at the screen. Every Jewish soul and body will be resurrected. One second. Where will it happen? In the land of Israel. Specifically, it will begin, can you guess it? In Jerusalem. Where in Jerusalem? No.
I'm sorry. Outside, you can see.
Yeah, what's it called? It's called the Mount of Olives. That's where it's going to start. Ezekiel says, the Mount of Olives.
The most expensive burial ground in the world. It's hard to get placed
you don't have to be buried there, although it's very special to be buried there. As a matter of fact, my father is buried there. And
We don't see you. We don't see you.
During the Intifada when nobody wanted to be there. But it's actually not that crazy. I'm going to show, because we're already here, I'm going to show this on the screen. I just took a picture. So if you go to our cemetery, what did we name our cemetery? Jerusalem Gardens. Why would I call my cemetery Jerusalem Gardens?
Because it's a nice
Because it's a nice name. Because our cemetery was dedicated with the Jewish traditions and the Jewish prayers, that this is that we all hope for the resurrection, for the resurrection of the dead. And that's why, pictures loading.
Rabbi, the reference saying that life is the
The world is a garden. Okay, so if you can see over here, this is the cornerstone. You see it? So it says on top in Hebrew, Ganei Yerushalayim.
We
Which
can
means Jerusalem
see
garden.
you.
Can't see,
Rabbi,
oh,
we can
hold
see
on.
you.
Okay, sorry, hold on. Let me change cameras here. Can you see now?
Yeah, now we see. No, not again. Yeah,
Now?
good.
Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, so here we see, and it says Ganei Yerushalayim, the Jerusalem Gardens in Hebrew. The Kahal Kedusha Chabad Venice of the Holy Congregation of Chabad of Venice, and here Bilal Hamavis Ledetzach. I described the verse in Isaiah that death will be swallowed forever, right? And there is a stone that when I was in Jerusalem 3 years ago at my father's grave, I was looking for a rock from that Mount of Olives. Now, what we do, by the way, when we bury somebody, we sprinkle earth from Jerusalem. I'll give you a little back. Have you seen that? And you sprinkle. Why do we sprinkle the earth? It's earth from that mountain, from Mount of Olives, because we're already giving them a foretaste that, and we say, not saying goodbye, but we pray that we're going to be reunited physically with you. And this is actually, I found a rock, very hard to find because everything's gravel there. I found the rock. And I took it along, we put it in, this is cornerstone for Mount of Olives, Jerusalem, Israel, 2018, which I found after the fact it was illegal. It's considered a piece of antique, okay, all right. Anyways, and so we're in the land of Israel, and how's it gonna happen? Well, do you believe in God? Believe God can do anything? It sounds like a crazy idea, right? What body's going to come back to life? How's it going to happen? But first of all, scientifically, it's not so far-fetched anymore. We can literally recreate a whole body from a cell, right? So that's, again, by the way, that's another thing, that the fact that we humans have ability to do so much more in terms of creation is because we're coming closer to the time where we'd be much more aligned to godliness. Unfortunately, with the light comes also the opposite. So technology, medicine can take us into extremes, can take us to be more godly, and can take us also completely the opposite. But God has the ability to rebuild the body, and the soul will re-enter. So look at the Maimonides. So we said the 13 principle of faith. I want you to go to, who asked about the population of the world? How's that going to work? How are we all going to fit, right? Reminds me of, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
When we say that the soul and body, but soul is not just one body. She's lives many lives. So
Exactly.
how gets this?
Good. I want to get to that question. Give me 1 second. We'll get to that question right after the text. She asked a good question, but the 13 principle of faith that we talked about, text 5, page 214. The resurrection of the dead. So this is one of the 13 principles of faith. Page 5, page 214. Right? The resurrection of the dead, Chiyat HaMetim, is a foundation of the Torah of Moses. One cannot maintain a connection to the Jewish religion without this belief. Very powerful word. In other words, it's not just a nice, nice hope. Khatikvah, we hope it will happen. But it is a foundation of Torah of Moses, and it maintains a connection to the Jewish religion. You cannot maintain a connection to Jewish religion without this belief. Why? What happens if I don't believe in it? I'm no connection to the Jewish people, to the Jewish belief. In other words, Maimonides, who, by the way, was not a mystic. We talk about mystical things, okay? Resurrection, reincarnation, sounds very mystical in a sense, right? Maimonides was not a mystic. Maimonides was a doctor. Maimonides was the physician of the Sultan. Maimonides was a rationalist. You read his books. Everything had to make sense. And he makes this statement. Why? Because as we're going to see, it goes to the foundation of the entire creation that God has put in place of man and its place in this world. We like to call tikkun olam. Now, I'm not talking about the recycling, which we should do anyways. I'm talking about the core of tikkun olam. Tchiyat hametim, resurrection of death, is the ultimate tikkun olam, is to bring the body back in alignment with the soul. We still didn't talk about how do we do that. So we're just talking about what's going to be, how do we actually going to do that? But first, let's address her question. This is a question on page 214, her question, right? Your question. It's right in the book. Wait, you don't have a book? Freddie, there's an extra book in the shelf by the paper. You want to grab it? You don't mind? Thank you. I'm just going to bring another book. All right, based on the Kabbalistic understanding of reincarnation, what did we learn last week? That the soul keeps going into different bodies, right? As discussed in lesson 4, verse 5, how would you reconcile the resurrection of the dead with the concept of reincarnation? So which body are you going to go? Good question, right? All right. Text 6, now Rizal explains it. If the first time a soul descended into a body, it passed away before it was fully rectified. At the time of resurrection, that body will possess the portion of the soul it rectified while alive. Remember, we talked that souls have many sparks. And we think sometimes soul as being as one thing, right? A soul is like a flame, and a flame can go infinitely, right? And have many sparks, another spark, another spark. As we learned, reincarnation is basically if, let's say, we have 613 sparks, and you only did 500, the other 213 sparks will be reincarnated again, one more time, and then again, and again. So the soul has many sub-souls. So whatever part of the soul was in that body, in that generation, that body will come back alive with that part of the soul. So when we're all going to have Mashiach, maybe we can have a reunion of all of our souls that reincarnate in different bodies. All right. So when the same soul reincarnates into another body to complete its rectification, the portion of the soul that was rectified in the second body will verify the second body when it rises at the resurrection. Okay, so that takes care of that because people were scared. What happens if I was married to 2 husbands?
No, the part that wasn't rectified comes back, or the part that was rectified?
In other words, we said that Mashiach will come when all the souls are when we have accomplished everything we needed to accomplish, right? So in other words, when Mashiach comes, everything was done, job accomplished. Then there's a resurrection. The part of the soul that was in that body comes back in that body. The other part of the soul that needed to come back and resurrect when it was reincarnated in body number 2, that part of the soul will be in body number 2. And the other part 3 will be in body 3. You understand? So basically, it's not one soul in 15 bodies. It could be 15 parts of the soul in 50 different bodies.
Got it.
About 2 husbands, I'm not going to go into. That's a question we're not going to know till Mashiach comes. Good luck. One more thing I forgot to mention. There is a thing about burying your loved ones in Israel. You know, we want to bring our loved ones to Israel. Did I share my favorite joke about that? No? I'll bring a little bit to do, right? So this lady in New York goes to Israel. She checks in allowed first class, and she brings along her dog. And they, they put the big box where they put the dog in the cargo. And they arrive in Israel, and they allow personnel unloads, and to their shock, they see that the dog died in transit. And they are scared because the lady's a multi-millionaire and they're going to sue Allah. What are they going to do? She's going to sue them. So she decides, they said to her, listen, we have a problem with the cargo. It's not opening. It takes some more time. Meanwhile, in Israel, they go on a search for an identical dog. And within an hour, they found an identical dog. They swap the dog and they bring out the cargo and says, here, we have your dog. And she looks and she starts to scream. She says, what's the matter? She says, I came to bury my dog in Israel. Yeah, but the Jews have always wanted to be buried in Israel if we can, right? They try all the time. Why? Because the prophet tells us, and I don't want to go too graphic, too detailed into this, that all the bodies from around the world will be resurrected where? In Israel. So how the body's going to get to Israel? Basically, God is going to bring them under the ground. There'll be tunnels. So God's going to bring all those bones and bodies resurrected in Israel, where in the Mount of Olives, hence, which is in a sense a painful experience. So it's always ideal to be buried in Israel, within Israel, on the Mount of Olives. That's the reason why. Moving on. What do you say?
The Arabs are digging the
The
tunnel.
Arabs are there. Okay. Why is it so important that we have to believe in that the body comes back? Why is it such an important part? So in the Talmud, it says that body and soul, as much as they can be opposite, but they're also partners in crime, or they're as we learned in lesson 1 and 2, right? The separation is very painful. Right, the body. After death, we need to bring the body to burial. Then the soul travels with the body to the Shiva house, and it's like, where is my body? Because although the body naturally is selfish, it was the only way for the soul to do mitzvot, to express itself. Right. So the Talmud says an analogy that when they get judged, so to speak, they get judged together, body and soul, and there's going to be a debate. Because the soul is going to blame the body for everything it did. That wasn't me, it was the body. The body says, it wasn't me, I'm just a body. The soul gives life, it was the soul, right? So the Talmud says an analogy of a king who has 2 gardeners. To the back of the book, we don't have to read it. I'll tell you outside. 2 gardeners, one is blind and one is lame. And they are working in the garden. And they see this beautiful tree with this fruit hanging, and they're like, wow, we want to eat that fruit. And the lame says, but I cannot walk to it. And the blind says, and I cannot see where it is. So they say, okay, the lame says, how about you pick me up on your shoulders and I will direct you to the fruit. So the gardener, the blind picks up the lame, they walk, the lame says where to go, they get to the fruit, they're enjoying the feast. The king comes out and says, hey, you stole my fruit, I'm gonna punish you. The lame says, it wasn't me, I can't even walk. The blind says, it wasn't me, I can't even see. The king says, I'll show you how it worked. He put them together, says, this is how it worked, I'll punish you together. It's a cute story, cute analogy. But the idea is behind that body and soul are equally responsible for their actions. And also for the good, for the rewards. So in other words, if we talk in the last lesson about the reward and punishment, right? That the soul gets in the afterlife, maybe the body should also get rewarded. The body also should get rewarded to have the spiritual rewards that it gets in the afterlife, but the body doesn't get anything. For that reason, God says, well, I'll make a time for that. When will be the time? When Mashiach comes, then there'll be the resurrection of death. Body will come back alive. It will be in a line with the soul. And now body and soul can have a good time together and body gets its rewards. Make sense? Yes. Simple explanation of why resurrection of death is a fundamental belief of Jewish faith. Because in Jewish faith, we believe in the idea of rewards and punishment. But here, it gets only punished, but where's the reward? However, that explanation does not suffice, because in that case, resurrection can happen, but it should happen for a little while, and then body gets its reward, and that body can go back in its grave. Why is it resurrection? We said, Bila Hamadas, there will be that death will cease to exist, that we're going to live forever in bodies. So there's obviously a deeper reason, and I would like to explain it now. Is there a question on this? Yeah.
How many bodies does the soul have?
Every time period that the soul was resurrected belongs to that part of the soul belongs to that part of the body.
So the body has more than one.
No, body has one soul. The body has one soul. Souls can be divided in many sub-souls. Yeah.
So how can the soul come back to all these different, they have all these bodies? And
Again, do one more time. Imagine you have a tree and you have a trunk, right? And then as many branches, all came from one trunk, but every branch is individual. So the soul branches out of many, many sub-souls. So that part of the soul that was branched out at that time when it was alive goes to that body. Then it branched out to another body. That part of the soul goes to that body. Okay. All right. Here's the deeper reason, and it's really, really a fascinating concept. We learned earlier that physical and spiritual are so interconnected. Everything in this world is made out of body and soul, not just humans, animals, not only animals, plants, trees, stones, rocks. What's the soul of everything? The soul is the life that gives it life. The fact that it exists, that is the soul of it. Take, for example, food, right? You have food. You eat the physical part of the food, but then there's the nourishment of the food that gives you life, correct? So our job is to bring together the soul and body, that they should align with each other. Let me make an illustration here. Let's see, I have here my cell phone right here, right? And I have this is a Torah book and a cup of coffee. That's okay, this is Torah, right? Let's assume this is my prayer book. I have a prayer book, my cell phone, and a cup of coffee. Each of them contain godliness in it, right?
Contains what?
Godliness in it. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. But which one has the most godliness? The siddur, the coffee, or my cell phone? Huh? The siddur. And then second one? The coffee. Why? Why? In other words, where do I see more godliness in it? In the siddur or my cell phone? Where do I see more? Where do I sense more godliness? Obviously, in the prayer book, right? If I have a mezuzah that is very holy, and the answer is, it's what I sense, because the siddur is used for what? For godly purpose. But in essence, the job is that my cell phone should be equally godly. That everything that I come in touch with, I should align that the godliness in it and the physical body that is containing it should be in alignment. Because my phone can be a tool for godliness. How? If I call somebody who's sick, Or somebody asks them, how you doing? Or if I study Torah from my phone. What I have done then, I have elevated the godliness in the phone and have brought it back in sync with its body. That is, by definition, tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means to fix the world, to realign the godliness that is in everything, that is God-oriented, to turn the physical vehicle. If I have a car, if I have a house, if I have a rock, I have a tree. What is the mindfulness when I use it? How do I use it? I pick up a cup of coffee. I say a blessing. Why do I say a blessing? Because I am consciousness, mindfulness that I'm drinking this coffee, not because I just want to enjoy pleasure of the world for my selfish purposes, but I want to drink the coffee so I can concentrate, so I can go out and help somebody, so I can study Torah. This is, in a sense, a mini resurrection that we do with every item we come in touch with every single day. Same thing goes with us. I wake up in the morning, my soul wants to be aligned with my body. I say, Modeh Ani. I wake up and I say, I'm grateful. Thank you, Hashem. Shehechazarta bi nishmati, for returning my soul. Be where? In my body. Rabba emunatecha. My faith is strong in you, Hashem, that I'm going to try to use my body in alignment with my soul. This is really what it's all about. This is why we're here on this earth. So brings us back to resurrection. When we reach a point where we see God's purpose in everything, even in the body, I have brought back the world to a pre-Garden of Eden state. So what is resurrection? It is the actualization of body and soul being in complete harmony. Look at text 7, page 217. Text 7, page 217. Judy, you want to read this for us? I need to drink my coffee. Thank you.
The reason God created the entire world, and the human being in particular, is because he desired our home in the lower realm. That is, God wished that the lower realm, namely the physicality of this world, should become subservient to and a vehicle for expressing God. The purpose of Torah and Mitzvah is to effect this transformation. That is the reason why Torah and Mitzvah are performed with physical objects by a soul vested in a physical body.
So every time you engage in a physical activity, and the physical activity is done as a mitzvah, or as a God with godly intention, then you are actually fulfilling the purpose of why you're on this earth. And the beauty of it is 24/7. Every moment of my life, I have the ability, and in a sense, the mission to do it. When I eat, when I sleep, when I exercise, it's all with a purpose, like for a deeper purpose of why I'm here on this earth. I'm not here by mistake. God has put me on this earth to make this world a home for God, where God feels comfortable in a physical body, in a physical world. And that's why a mitzvah is so powerful, because a mitzvah is the realignment that God has given us the ability. I can take a piece of a parchment and write the Shema on and put it on my door. Now the parchment became a holy object. Now my door is holy. My home is in alignment with soul and body. I put a tzedakah box in my house. My house is transformed into a physical edifice that, as we see over here, we rectify spiritual death when we value something not for its external properties, but for the ultimate purpose for which it exists. That is the deep theological answer for resurrection. Why resurrection? It's not just a nice idea, I'll be back with my loved ones. It is the ultimate, final goal of why God made all this happen, because resurrection is the point where now bodies can come back alive. There's no more spiritual death. We have refined everything. There's no more spiritual death. We're ready for, if there's no spiritual death, there's no physical death. We all come back alive. And we live forever, not because it sounds all nice and dandy, because that is the perfect, ultimate existence of God, body, and soul that are in perfect sync, perfect harmony. And that is the greatest joy. There'll be no more suffering, there'll be no more pain, there'll be no more hunger, there'll be no more, everything will be just that we are going to be serving God and basking in the light of God, not in a sub-spiritual realm, but body and soul. Now that sounds all very, very powerful, a beautiful idea. Think about it. And I want you to study this further, because it gives us a new perspective. It gives us a deeper perspective of why we're here, where we're going. And but let's talk a little bit more about a resurrection for the living for a moment. There's two more topics that we'll talk. Resurrection for the living, right? Because the Torah is called Torat Chaim, which means Torah of life, right? And everything we learned today sounds a little more about something that happens in the future, right? Nothing that happens now. Although every day my activity is without intention, because it can happen in an instant. Messianic era can happen, as it says in the prophet, in a blink of an eye. Because imagine we have been at the end of the exile, the end of this era, and one more mitzvah has the ability to tip the scale and bring us this era. It wouldn't be that amazing. But that's kind of a tremendous motivation as well, because we always we hope and we pray it can happen today.
So that's just a big question. Why he choose so complicated way?
It wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be fun. Yes, that's a big question. But here I want to go a little bit more. I want to take the concept of resurrection, make it a little bit more meaningful in today's in while I'm still alive in exile. Okay, so today at night I'm in exile. How can I make it a little more? So actually, resurrection then is not the first time. We did have in the prophets a mini resurrection. So this was in the time period of between the first and second temple. The Jews are in exile in the Babylonia. It was a very bad time for the Jews. Jews are completely they have given up. The temple was destroyed. They were exiled, and they have turned their backs to God. About 2,400 years ago, in Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel describes a resurrection, famously known the Valley of the Dry Bones. The valley, I think there's a song, right? The Valley of the Dry Bones. So here's what happened, and let's read it in text 8. And Joyce, would you like to read it for us? Page 218, thank you.
God took hold of me, and by his spirit carried me out and set me down in the midst of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me around the bones. There were many bones on the surface of the valley, and they were exceedingly dry. God said to me, Son of man, can these bones become alive? Prophesy over these bones and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of God. So says God to these bones, behold, I will cause spirit to enter into you, and you shall live. I prophesied as I commanded. There was a noise as I prophesied, and then a commotion. The bones came together, one bone to its neighbor. And as I looked, sinews and flesh came upon the bones, and skin covered them from above. The spirit then entered them, and they came alive. They then stood on their feet, an exceedingly great army. Then God said to me, Son of man, these bones are a symbol for the house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones have become dried up, Our hope is lost, and we are cut off. Therefore prophecy and say to them, so says God, behold, my people, I will open your graves and bring you up from them and bring you to the land of Israel. I will put my spirit within you and you shall live.
All right. Beautiful story. Never heard of it? From the book of Ezekiel, very famous story. And there's debate actually if it actually happened or was a metaphor. Everything is a debate. And one of the rabbis comes and says, what do you mean it was a metaphor? I'm resurrected, I'm a reincarnation of one of the people from the but the point here is, so I want to bring out is the idea, it is a strong metaphor as well, that the concept of hope. As we learned earlier, hope is a very strong, very, very powerful, it's a powerful force, especially for us Jews, when we come at times where we feel that we are like dry bones, where we have suffered so much in exile. Well, look at today. The Jewish people are scattered. The Jewish people are maybe spiritually dry. Not that many Jews are engaged in Torah. The synagogues are not as full, except here, right? It's declined. This is declined spiritually, and that kind of can be a downer. But we need to remember the promise of Ezekiel, that God has promised that we have the ability. Don't give up. You have the ability, even when it looks like it's dry and it's dead. You have the ability to bring life back into our people as we do, and also personally. You will have the days where you wake up and you feel dead, not dead physically. You feel that's it. I have no kayak, I have no strength, I have no motivation. I don't want to do Shabbos. I don't want to be a good person. I just want to be selfish and care just about myself. So God says, you have a soul, you have a neshama, and I gave you life, I gave you your body, I gave you your soul, and I'm always with you. And there's always ability for you to reignite and rebuild. There's never a time where that is the final answer. All right. There was a rabbi, a shtetl, they were looking for a new rabbi. So they sent one of the yankel on a mission to find a rabbi from the nearby cities. And he comes back with a one-handed rabbi. He was missing a hand. So they said, from all the rabbis, why did you bring a one-handed rabbi? So the yankel says, look, I had enough of the rabbis always giving us such answers. On one hand, the answer is this. On the other hand, one hand. I gave you a lot of hands. This course, we did a lot of teachings, different views of how we can have a deeper understanding of our mortality, what happens to our loved ones, resurrection or death. But the big question really that we always deal with when somebody dies is that deep void, the pain that a person goes through. And how do we deal with this? What is the Jewish answer to deal with the loss of a loved one? What's the ultimate answer? Rabbi, give me the ultimate answer. Why? What? How can I deal with this loss? You want the easy answer or the long answer? You want both? Two-handed rabbis. Okay. Let me take a little journey. And actually, in this week's Torah portion, we read about the story of the golden calf. Right? The sin of the golden calf. By the way, at the giving of Torah, the Jews were elevated to such a spiritual level in body and soul. They were able to hear the Ten Commandments. What happened? They hear the first two commandments and then they expire. According to the commentaries, in the oral tradition, it says all Jews at Sinai actually died from the power of God's voice, and God resurrected them. In addition, it's a new story. In addition, Jews were elevated to a level that Mashiach, the Messianic era, should have or could have happened at that moment or that time, and Jews could went straight into Israel and built the temple and lived happy ever after. But 40 days after the giving of the Torah, the Jews are worshiping an idol, right? They went from the greatest heights to the lowest in such a short time period. That's another discussion how that happened. In a sense, because they didn't work. They didn't have to do any tikkun to get to that level. There was no refinement process. It was like a gift. You pull somebody out of jail, you put them on the throne, and they say, oh, it's great. And they get spoiled. And the next day they become the most spoiled, selfish people. And that's what happened. The Jews went and worshiped an idol. Then Moses goes up the mountain, right, for 80 days. And after 80 days, so we had 40 days in the mountains, first tablets. 40 days after they do the golden calf. 80 days, Moses is debating with Hashem to forgive the Jewish people. 120 days after the Torah, 3 months, when we have Yom Kippur, God says, I forgave the Jewish people. Forgive them. And he gives us a second tablet. What comes right after Yom Kippur? God says, build me a sanctuary. Build the Mishkan, the Mikdash. We read the last 2 weeks in the portions of a beautiful building to build. And Hashem says, "Asuli mikdash v'shechanti betocham." Take the gold, take the silver that you worshipped, and bring about the ultimate purpose that we learned today. The gold and silver should be for the purpose of godliness, the body and soul come together. And then God introduced in the next book the laws of purity and impurity. These are spiritual purity and spiritual impurity. So, do you know a Kohen is not allowed to go to a cemetery? Why not? Because a Kohen is on a level to serve in the temple, and death is spiritual impure, as we learned today. When a person touches a dead body, even a dead animal, they contract a certain spiritual impurity. It's not wrong. You can do that, but if you're a Kohen, you're not supposed to touch a dead body. It's a mitzvah to take care of a dead body, to prepare a body, but a Kohen is never going to be part of the Khatikvah and also should not be on the cemetery. Exception if it's close relatives. So what happens in temple? This goes back to what I said earlier. We're not allowed to go to the Temple Mount because the Temple Mount is the holiest place, and we are all in a state of impurity because impurity transfers from generation, from mother to child. In other words, if mother has not been purified, it goes to the child. This means that we are all impure. Okay, bad news. Bad news. Now, it's not a problem technically because we don't have a temple. But what happens if we had a temple and I did touch a dead body and I'm a Kohen, I want to go to visit the temple? What do? I need to go through a mikvah. Mikvah is a ritual bath that purifies. It's purity. Again, everything I'm saying is not physical. As people think mikvah is a physical purity. It's not physical. It's spiritual in nature. A woman today has a mitzvah to go to the mikvah after her period. Not because they're dirty, God forbid, because it explained that a period is the potential for life, right? But there's a certain impurity, spiritual impurity that's connected to it. Mikvah is the ability to be pure, to purify yourself. It's a beautiful way for a woman to elevate, and she is the only one. I'm going off track, but she's the only one in exile that has the ability to become pure. The mitzvah of purity only exists today for women after her period. So a Jewish woman after her period goes to the mikvah once a month, or if she's already post, they don't have to go to the mikvah anymore, but at least they should go once. Okay, but I don't want to go into that detail. But the point is, all this, does it make any sense to you? No? Yes? Makes any sense to you? No, be open. Really, what's it? Why? Why is going to a bath pure, impure? Can you touch it? It's not logical. There's no logic to it. On one hand, there's no logic. My point is as follows.
You know why?
Yeah. We have mitzvah that God has given us mitzvahs that make sense. For example, what's a mitzvah that makes sense? Honor your parents, right? Celebrating Passover. Make sense? Huh? Yep. There are mitzvahs that God says have no reason, there's no logic to them. For example, kosher. There's no rational reason for kosher. It's not healthier. There's nothing healthy about kugel and schmaltz herring, right? But we have mitzvot, they're called chukim, they're called supranational mitzvot. The mitzvahs of purity and impurity are not rational mitzvot. If somebody gets in touch with a dead body in temple times, mikvah itself was not enough. They also had to do something that's called the mitzvah in Hebrew of parat aduma. They take a red heifer and burn the heifer, take its ashes, mix it with living water, and sprinkle on the person that got contaminated by touching a dead body, and that's how it becomes pure. Make any sense? No. Thank you. I just gave you a lot of information with no reason. Point this like this. I want you to read text 9, and we're going to wrap this up. Text 9, page 220. Solomon said, I was able to arrive at the reasons for all these other enigmatic commandments. The law of the red heifer, however, I investigated, inquired, and searched, and I finally admitted I am determined to be wise. Solomon was the wisest man ever lived, yet this is distance from me. So he could not figure out the logic, the understanding between red heifer and red heifer purifies a person who gets in touch with the dead. With one exception, only one person in history God was granted the understanding of this law. Who? Moses. Text 10. In all matters of ritual impurity that God taught Moses, he would tell him both the manner of contamination and the manner of purification. And God arrived at the Torah portion of Emor, which discusses the laws regarding one who comes in contact with a dead body. Moses said to him, Master of the universe, if one is thus contaminated, how may he be purified? God did not respond. At that moment, Moses' face changed colors. When God came to the section of the red heifer, he said to Moses, when I told you the portion of Emor, you asked me if one is thus contaminated, how may he be purified? At the time, I did not respond. This is how such a person becomes pure. They shall take from the impure person of the ashes of the burnt heifer. All right? So basically, touching the death, why did Moshe wanted to know the reason, right? One second, I'm gonna finish my thought. Sorry. Moshe wanted to know the reason why a person that touches a dead body, how does it become purified? You know what his question really was? His question was a person that gets in touch with death. That's what? Comes in touch with the concept of death. He loses a loved one. How can he become pure? How can he find comfort? How can it be rectified? What is this? What is the rationale? Why did you bring death in the world? And God says, I'm not going to tell you the reason. Moshe was, his face changed colors. He was, how can you live? If you don't explain to me, how can it be? How can it live? How can there be such a concept of death? Until God introduced the red heifer, right? And then he says, okay, now I get it. My friends, the red heifer represents, my mother's writes, how many red heifers were there in our history? Very rare to find a red. Have you ever seen a red heifer, a red cow? It has to be completely red. You cannot have one black hair. You're laughing. It was very rare. How many red heifers were there in the times in our history between Moses and Temple 1, 2, which is about a span of almost 2,000 years? How many red heifers were there? Only 9. Only 9. It was very expensive. And they had to kind of preserve the ashes because they needed it to purify people who get in touch with their bodies. If you were a soldier and you were in the war and you want to now go to the temple, you need to have access to these little ashes. And Maimonides writes, number 10 will be with the coming of Mashiach. Mashiach will come after number 10. And this is the point. 1 second. Can we close the door, Sasha? I need 2 more minutes. This is up. We'll bring the food in. People will still be under such. They're going to need some time. If you don't mind, give me two more minutes. And point it like this. Red heifer, number 10, represents the resurrection of the dead. When we lose a loved one, there's only one answer that can bring us true comfort. And that is that we pray and we know that one day we will be reunited with our loved ones. Look at text 11, the Rebbe writes. The complete eradication of death effect will occur in a little way when those that dwell in dust will arise and joyfully sing. At that time, there will be no need to rationalize death or to emotionally process such rationalizations. For our eyes will see the awakening of those who dwell in dust, and our ears will hear the sound of joyful singing. In text 12, we have perfect confidence that God will rebuild. Remember the line we say at the Shiva house? What's the line we say at the Shiva house? Remember what's this one prayer we always say? No. What are the people come to comfort the mourners? What do we say? Hamakom, where's the food? Hamakom yenachem etchem besor sha'avnei Yerushalayim. May Hashem comfort you amongst all the mourners of Zion, Jerusalem. Hello, I'm in Venice. What's the connection to Jerusalem? I'm mourning. What? May I be comforted with all the mourners of Zion, Jerusalem? Yes, because my only response, my only true prayer that I can give you, we don't know the reasons why you had to lose a loved one. And we have no idea. Like Aaron, when he lost 2 sons, he was quiet, he was silent, he accepted it, but he didn't understand. The only comfort will be when Mashiach will come and will be reunited with a loved one. Text 12, we'll continue with text 12. We have perfect confidence that God will rebuild the ruins of Zion, Jerusalem. He will gather the dispersed remnants of Israel from the ends of the earth through our righteous Mashiach, and he will bring them in gladness to witness the joy of Zion and Jerusalem. We're equally confident that the same is true with regards to our personal bereavement. God will fulfill his promise that those that dwell in the dust shall awake and joyfully sing. Great indeed will be the happiness and rejoicing then, when we all will meet together after the resurrection of the dead. If that's become part of your daily prayer, think about it. And we say it in our Amidah. The second prayer of the Amidah is Ata Gibor Machaya Metim. We say, right? Baruch Ata Hashem Machaya HaMetim. But the song, you guys know the song. Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed. Right? What does it mean? Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed. How's it go? Rachamim Rabim. Sohamech Noflim Rofei Cholim Umatir Avsurim Umekayem Emunatav Li Shenei Afar. You sing it so nicely, you know what it means? No. What does it mean? You, God, who gives us life with kindness. You give us life. You take care of the poor. You take care of the hungry. Right? And you fulfill your promise. Emunato, your promise to the faith. To the people who are sleeping in the ground. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, Lord. Mechayeh hamatim, that is going to bring the death back alive. If you have a siddur that took that out, shame on them. So look at, make sure you have a siddur that has to pray. Because some people took that out because they can't understand, but they have lacked the depth of the foundation of Judaism. My friends, this was a good. It was a good class. Let's just look quick at the recap, so I make sure I didn't. It will make it clear. Just watch the last thing here.
Key points. Lesson 6. 1. Death entered the human condition as a result of Adam and Eve's eating from the tree of knowledge. From this, we learn that death is a consequence of human error, and that immortality is the ideal state of existence. When we fix this error, we will again become immortal. 2. In the Messianic era, not only will death be abolished, but the souls of all those who perish will be reunited with their bodies,
Everybody will be resurrected, including those that possess reincarnated souls. This is a cardinal principle of the Jewish faith. 3. Before the sin, the body was an extension of the soul, and their desires were perfectly in sync. In a broader sense, there was no separation between the physical world, the body, and its godly purpose, the soul. The sin of eating from the tree was an act of spiritual death, the separation of body and soul due to misaligned values. This resulted in physical death. 4. Our job is to see beyond the superficial layers of things and instead focus on their inner truth and purpose, their life. This brings body and soul back in sync, thus precluding spiritual and physical death. 5. The resurrection is a message of hope. Even at times we feel lifeless, we have the capacity to be resurrected at any moment, nationally and personally. 6. The ability to heal from loss defies all logic and reason. Nevertheless, the law of the red heifer empowers us to heal to a degree from pain, anguish, and grief. The hole in our hearts will be completely healed with the resurrection of the dead, when we will be reunited with our loved ones.
All right, now this is from another course. By the way, those who, this concludes this class, this lesson, this course, which we can go on and on and on, and no, we can. But we switched, we started yesterday the course on Jewish meditation. And if you haven't taken advantage of it, it's on Monday mornings. You can still join. Really, we had a great class yesterday, and it will, everything we're teaching, it all interconnects everything that we learned today as well, which helps us live more, have more mindfulness and understanding and purpose, and how to deal with our anxieties and feelings. Torah gives us all these tools, and it's right in front of us, but we haven't, it was not taught in Hebrew school enough. I understand why I'm an old fan to drill a child at the bar mitzvah just to learn the Haftorah by heart. I did not give the child the very basics of Judaism that they can understand and understand the meaning and deeper spirituality of everything. Yes, they should do the Haftorah, but they should learn what the Haftorah says. And they should know that they should not go, because what happens with these bar mitzvah boys? They come to the bar mitzvah and they never come back again because it was a they have peer, you can still have still trauma from the bar mitzvah. Anyways, I'll conclude with this joke and then we can eat. There was a rabbi and a priest who get together, and they had a they always get for lunch. They were discussing the issues they have in the synagogues and the churches, and the priests says, we have a mice problem. There's mice running around in our sanctuary. It's really a problem. And the rabbi says, we had the same problem, and we had a solution. The priest says, what did you do? He says, it would be crazy. Saturday during the service, mice are running around, people were screeching. One day I had enough. Middle of the week, I went to the sanctuary, I went to the bima, I pulled out a big Swiss cheese. Within a minute, all the mice in the synagogues were on the bima. I took out a talis, I bar mitzvahed them, they never came back. I want you to take these teachings and continue your studies and join classes, come here, go online. This is not the end. You got to continue to learn day in, day out. It was a pleasure. Yes. And we're going to serve lunch now. Thank you.
Wonderful. This morning, we kept to turn on Fox, and Hammer was being interviewed, and somebody asked him what you think of the Super Bowl game. He says, I'm sitting still for my brain.
They need a resurrection. Bengals. Yes, Leona, you had a question. Leona, you had a question before. Still have?
Dead body,
Yeah.
is that only a human body? And
There's different degrees of impurity. So the red heifer is the only solution for touching a dead body. If you touch a dead animal, mikvah is typically enough. But it's not important today. In other words, if you touch a dead animal or a dead body, there is no need or a mitzvah to go to a mikvah. The mitzvah mikvah is exclusively today only for women, because they have that spiritual connection to Hashem. Hashem has allowed them to have a temple experience, which is really powerful. The mitzvah of mikvah is the most powerful mitzvah if we understand it, if we study it. And correct. Every human being by definition impure. And again, it's not a negative thing. It's not like, oh, I'm impure. No, it's a matter of a logistics thing in terms of temple, not temple, in temple times. Every doctor, yeah, and every rabbi who deals with it, that's true. Yes. Any other questions? We can take questions over. We can discuss it more over lunch. If somebody wants to tell Sasha that she can bring the food and I kicked her out. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Many people. There was two tailors. They had a debate. They were saying said how are we going to have there's going to be the resurrection of death will come and there's going to be so many tailors, we're going to lose business. All right. So Yanko the tailor says no, but I know the latest style. So I was going to do. Again, in a God's world, God can make anything happen. And if there's no, we thinking like the woman, the baby in the womb, right? We can't see that there's a world out there. The world will change. So the ability to have nothing will be lacking. Everybody will have what they need. There'll be infinite amount of supplies and space. Then yeah, why not? Right now we're thinking very narrow-minded.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.